Hi, I'm Cody Sims. I'm the Senior Vice President of Climate and Sustainability at Techstars. Techstars is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. We work with startups at the earliest stages and help them advance their business by connecting them with mentorship, with capital, and with talent to help them learn what they need to grow their business from being a technology startup to hopefully a world-changing company. Today, we run close to 50 different startup accelerator programs around the world. These startup accelerator programs are 3-month intensive boot camp programs where startups connect with mentors and industry experts to help them grow their business. They're highly selective programs. Typically, only 1% to 2% of applicants are accepted in, and each one comes with $120,000 US in funding to help those startups get initial capital into their business as they grow. We've had over 2,000 companies join the Techstars network worldwide, and these companies have gone on to raise billions of dollars, achieve IPOs, be acquired by major companies, and make a real difference in the world. On the climate and sustainability front, we currently have about 200 companies in the Techstars portfolio that are working on solutions to climate change or circular economy, or just generally creating products that are better for the planet. Those companies are based all over the world and are working on everything from food and agriculture solutions to new solutions to carbon removal from the atmosphere, to better supply chains, to mobility and transport changes to the way we all navigate the planet, to new forms of energy and much more. So it's been a really exciting time to see so many entrepreneurs and so many founders starting to lean more and more into this movement of tech companies working in climate, or as we're starting to call the whole movement, the movement of climate tech. I think right now there are really 3 key things that need to happen in the world of climate to help us all as a planet collectively do more. One is obviously policy change. And so we're starting to see more and more countries commit to net zero or even zero emissions mandates over the course of the next decade or two. And we're seeing more and more large companies start to do the same. And that to me moves into sort of the next big lever that needs to shift, which is capital markets and finance. So looking at where every dollar is invested to understand if that money that's being invested is going into a cause that is proactive for supporting climate action and supporting climate change, and isn't going to the status quo of organizations that are continuing to generate carbon emissions. And then finally, an area that I think is maybe underappreciated is the notion of storytelling and media, and how media talks about climate. I like to say, in the United States, you wouldn't have seen the amount of social change that happened in the 1960s and 1970s if people were not creating stories of inspiration. You look at someone like Dr. Martin Luther King, and he created stories of inspiration about how civic change needed to happen. And I think the same with climate change. Right now, we've been telling stories of doom and gloom for the last few decades, rather than telling stories about what could an aspirational future look like when we decarbonize. And so to me, those are 3 big levers that need to happen. On the technology front in particular, we need innovators from all stripes and all different types. We need innovators working on hardware solutions to new forms of clean energy. We need innovators working on carbon capture technologies that can actually remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We need innovators working on new fintech and finance solutions for how carbon startups can get financed, how we can remove greenhouse gas emissions emitters from traditional means of financing, and how we can accelerate divestment in that regard. And then obviously mobility and transport, we need the continued development and scale out of electric vehicles, not just automobiles, but all sorts of electrical appliances and forms of transport, and really anything that is currently using a gas-powered engine. And then, the way we eat and the way we feed our planet this planet's going to grow from 7 billion people to 10 billion people over the next couple of decades. And we're already feeding the planet in an unsustainable way. So how can we shift how food is produced, how we fertilize that food, how we package it and ship it around the world to ensure that we're doing so in a way that's sustainable and regenerative? So entrepreneurs working in technology solutions of all of those types. And then, of course, the most obvious is just people helping to scale out the existing renewable technology that's already out there in wind and solar, and that can take the place of new financial markets that need to be created. That can take the place of new ways of understanding how your scope 3 emissions in your supply chain are or are not leveraging renewables and what to do about it, and many other innovations beyond everything I've named, I'm sure. This is a space where new innovations need to be married with existing built out solutions to help those existing business models convert to a decarbonized format. And so I think that, as we are all collectively working to essentially rebuild the global economy from the studs up over the next decade or two, it has to be one of collaboration, where innovators can introduce new solutions to large industry. That large industry can experiment, try things out, see if it's cost effective, see how it potentially is more in desire by their consumers, and ultimately look to swap either the products that they offer or the processes that they use. That form of collaboration feels so much more important in this space than maybe over the last 2 decades as we moved into more software-based models of our economy, because those truly were bottoms-up disruption. That was moving from means of production or means of creation of goods that were physical to ones that were digital only. And so you had whole new players emerge. I think in this space, it's about helping legacy industry make the transition to a decarbonized model and using new technology as partners as they do that together. One of the big challenges that early stage startups have in the climate tech space is how to collaborate effectively with large companies, particularly at the pilot or proof of concept stage. Because it's very rare that a large company is just going to take your pitch deck and think about what you're saying from a scientific perspective and just deploy it en masse to their production process, because there's a lot of integration involved. So typically they'll want to do some kind of lightweight proof of concept or lightweight pilot with your technology. And it's really important for startups to be really clear with where their technology is from a readiness perspective. So one thing that startups and companies can do together is be really transparent with each other on where they are from that perspective, and then build a roadmap together for what it will look like as they advance the technology through that large company's process. That could take the form of, at the earliest of stages, just working on scientific validation together, doing bench testing or lab testing together to ensure that the claims that the startup is making from a scientific perspective hold up to the rigors of testing that the large company may need. And then if they do, how that moves on to an actual trial pilot or proof of concept integration. And then here's where things get really unique for a lot of climate startups, particularly in energy or manufacturing or food and ag, is oftentimes they will have a process that needs to get locally deployed that needs capital in order to hit that deployment. And so if the large company and startup can actually build a roadmap together of what a capital investment from the large company might look like into a local implementation of that technology in order to scale it together, that can be really meaningful. And that can help that startup advance rather than the startup needing to fund that potentially multi-million-dollar deployment off of their balance sheet, which is obviously quite limited as an early stage company. I mean, as I understand it, in late 2020, the Japanese government set the goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 0 by 2050 and become carbon neutral, which is amazing. And so this is all part of the green growth strategy that's happening in Japan. As I understand it, that's going to provide extensive funding and tax incentives for companies to develop and deploy technologies required for this green growth. That is incredible. And what I would encourage is for, I talked a minute ago about how startups and large companies can collaborate potentially on pilots and projects together. I would certainly encourage startups to look for large companies in Japan who are aligned with this green growth strategy and have themselves set their own carbon neutral goals and their own net zero goals, and potentially look together for ways that those tax incentives or other key amounts of government funding could come together to help them actually fund some of those local deployments. Because that's where you can get public, private, and startup working together in a sort of triumvirate to solve these problems as a collaborative entity, which is what we need to make this whole movement that is so required for all of our livelihoods and those of our children to actually work. This, again, is not a thing where a startup's going to innovate in a vacuum and come up with a magical solution. This is going to be about legacy incumbents, early stage technology startups, and policymakers collaborating together to help us all shift the way products and goods and services are made and the way we live our lives.